Hello and welcome to Recovery 360, the podcast dedicated to exploring the pathways to treatment and recovery. Brought to you by Recovery Centers of America. I'm Lorraine Ballard-Morrill, Director of News and Community Affairs for iHeartMedia Philadelphia. I am so pleased to introduce my friend, my colleague, Tony Luke Jr. Tony, you have had such a powerful voice when it comes to talking about recovery. And I wonder if you could just briefly tell us a little bit about your connection with the whole field of recovery, because you have a very personal mission.
Yes. So in 2017, I lost my son, Tony, on March 27th to an overdose. And I'm old school. When I was a kid, I would use a lot of drugs and I just stopped because I wasn't self-medicating an issue. And I had trouble with my son understanding why he couldn't just stop, which is a lot of parents don't get it. They don't understand the self-medicating of addiction. And I was kind of thrust into this when a gentleman had said to me, "I heard about your son. Did he pass from cancer?" And I said, "No, it was an overdose." And he got very upset, as if my son did something wrong to me. And I realized that my lane was to really do whatever I could to make people understand addiction and to get rid of the stigma that has been perpetrated 100 years, which was the uphill battle. So teaming up with you and doing this show and having all these amazing guests on, I'm hoping I can reach people and you can reach people, and together we can reach people in a way where we're like sitting in their home and let them know that we've been through it. I know it. I feel it, and whatever I can share to help bring some hope or some relief to someone that is suffering, I think this show has a great chance of doing that.
Well, in every episode, we're going to be sitting down with experts, survivors, and advocates in the field of treatment and recovery. We'll be talking about the riddle of addiction, the complexities, mental health, and physical wellness, while shedding light on the diverse range of therapies, interventions, and approaches available. In today's episode, we'll talk about overcoming, we're talking about the circle of recovery. People enter addiction treatment at different points in their lives, right? Their recovery journey is very specific to each individual. Some people seek help at the very beginning, recognizing the substance use problem and wanting to address it proactively. Others may enter treatment after experiencing severe consequences or hitting rock bottom, realizing the urgent need for change. Every person's journey is unique, but almost always a loved one or family member is also affected by their substance use. Addiction is a disease that affects the entire family.
You could not be more on point when you said that. And many individuals, they go through multiple cycles of treatment and relapse, but you hope with each relapse serving as a potential turning point, leading them back into treatment. Additionally, some may enter treatment as part of a court mandate or due to family interventions. Regardless of the entry point, addiction treatment provides vital support and resources to help individuals regain control of their lives and move forward towards lifelong lasting recovery.
Yeah, we're very excited to be joined by Dr. Peter Vernig, who is Vice President of Mental Health Services, and Dr. Hyung Un, Chief Medical Officer, both from Recovery Centers of America. Tony?
Well, share different viewpoints when patients enter Recovery Centers' 3 pathways. And what does the life cycle of recovery journey, what does it look like? Explain to people that. People don't know. They really don't know that.
Yeah, Pete?
Sure. So when we think about people who are coming into treatment, really, we're thinking about them not as all being the same. I think that that's a place where a lot of times we do a great disservice to people who are in recovery and who are starting their recovery journey, is by just looking at sort of a one-size-fits-all way of providing people with care. So when we are assessing, when we are working out a plan of care for patients, what we look at is people who are in treatment for the first time. You had kind of brought up, Tony, the the idea about people cycling through treatment or having been in treatment for multiple episodes. And I think that because we sometimes will focus on that, we'll forget about the person who's in treatment for the first time. And this is something, the fear, the stigma, the difficulty just of not knowing what to expect, the uncertainty is amazing for these individuals and for their families. So being able to tailor their treatment to their specific needs, to learn about their illness, learn about how it affects them and their families, versus folks who have been in treatment before. And, they maybe don't need that initial learning. They've already gone through that, but we have amazing opportunities with them to look at what has worked and what hasn't worked in the past. Every experience of treatment that somebody has, they got something from that was helpful, and they probably were things that didn't help them and that were even counterproductive. So let's learn from that and help that to tailor their treatment going forward. And then finally, you brought up also the idea of trauma and mental health, and how for so many people that's behind their substance use
Yep.
disorders. So we look at folks who come in to see us who have a major mental illness or have a history of trauma or even have a physical illness, a pain disorder or something else that is driving their substance use. And what can we do to treat the entire person, not just their substance use disorder, but treat what's going on underneath that, so that we're truly not just putting a Band-Aid on the surface, but we're addressing what's going on underneath that.
Yeah, Dr. Un, as Pete says, people come in to treatment in different points. Some people have been in treatment before, some people for the first time. Some people need to get to rock bottom, right, before they are ready. And other people recognize that this is something that they need to address. And they may not have hit rock bottom, but they know that that is their point. Let's talk about those different entry points that people have a little bit more.
So first of all, my hope is that people don't have to hit rock bottom to get treatment.
Oh,
Yeah.
I thank God you said. You have no idea how much that means to me hearing you say that.
Yeah, it's really important that we try to capture people in their journey. And there are going to be people who are ready first time. They will get better. They'll make recovery, sustain recovery, and lead a normal life. And as Pete says, there are people who are having recurrent episodes. And then there are people with behavioral health disorders. And they need different types of interventions, and the families need different types of support. For the first time, you're frightened, you're scared, you don't know where to go, you don't know what to do. Maybe on the recurrent episode, you're frustrated with that family member. And then with psychiatric disorders, you may not even know what to do. Do I go for the mental health first? Do I treat substance use first? And it's very confusing. So making sure we meet the person where they are, whether they're ready or not, and try to help them start their journey. Because getting them started and getting them sustained in their journey is critically what's important.
Tony, you reacted to what the doctor said about not having to hit rock bottom. You reacted to that, and I'm sort of curious as to why you said, yeah, I'm glad you said that.
Because it's there's two ways to look at rock bottom. What is rock bottom? Is rock bottom being in a street with nothing and ill and all alone and just abandoned? Is that rock bottom? Or is rock bottom a mental state where people just become tired of being tired? I'm sorry.
No, it's okay, Tony.
When my son died, my son Michael gave eulogy, and every time Tony would come over, he would be very distant, and he didn't want to be involved in anything, and it would get my son mad, my middle son Michael, and he would be like, "Why do you come over if you want to act that way? Why do you want to come over?" And when he died, and Michael gave eulogy, he told that story. And he said, I didn't realize till after I learned that Tony was just tired. He was tired of being tired. People think people struggling with addiction are weak. They're not. They're the strongest people you will ever want to meet in your entire life, because they are battling that. And to be judged every day and look at the stares that you get and the way people talk about you And no one is harder than someone in recovery or in active addiction on themselves than themselves. And they get to feel hopeless. So when you said that, it just hit a nerve with me because, God, we should have programs in place. People should understand we shouldn't let someone get to a point where it's them wanting to die, just wanting to die for us to step in. And I know there'll be people that listen to the podcast and then turn around and go, you don't understand. If they don't want help, yes, I get it. If someone doesn't want help, you can put them in recovery. You can force them to go to recovery and nothing will change because they don't want that. But we need to look at recovery different than we've been looking at. We need to look at the human aspect of why people are self-medicating. And you said something else that just, oh my God, it blew my mind. It's like sometimes we're so focused on the sobriety that we forget that there's a reason for this. And when you said sometimes you have to decide, is the mental health aspect the most important thing to start with, or is it the sobriety? Is it getting in the detox? And I got to tell you, honestly, I'm a big believer that we should work on the mental issue and then slowly get them into that instead of just throwing them into a room and detoxing them and going, well, now your body doesn't need it anymore. Go out, have fun. God bless you, and use your willpower, because eventually willpower breaks. So when you said that, my respect level for you went up 5,000 points, because that is so important that he said that and so important to address. And it just, it affected me. It
Yeah.
did. It affected me when you said that.
Well,
Oh,
Tony,
go ahead.
yeah, I'm sorry. Tony, I think you encapsulated the whole area of how substance use disorder has evolved. So first of all, hitting rock bottom is really another example of stigma, right? It's, you have to suffer to recover kind of thing. And that's not the case. So stigma tells us that people have to hit rock bottom. And that was true for mental health. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, depression was stigmatized.
Yeah.
And people had to just pull themselves up by the bootstrap. And that's not the case. They can get treatment early, just as you can get treatment for substance use disorder. The other thing is that it's a disorder of the brain. It's a disorder that causes impact on your motivation, impact on your reward, your ability to think. Actually, that is the rock bottom for the brain. And once you're at that state, you really need help to recover. And to your point, you need to make sure we heal the brain, the mental illness.
That's wonderful. Wonderful point. Pete, just to follow up on what's been said so far about meeting patients where they are, I think that's something that a lot of people on the outside or within the family have a hard time with. Just like Tony talked about, his son wasn't really understanding where his other son was at, and thinking, why doesn't he do this, or why doesn't he have this attitude? So how do you tell family members and friends how to really approach someone who's going through that struggle and meeting them where they are?
So in the field, we use the term meet the patient where they are all the time, and that kind of is representative of some of the developments in the field over the past 10, 20 years. The idea that confrontation and that sort of linear approach that, starting with rock bottom, then a withdrawal management or detox program, then a residential, then an outpatient. It's a one size fits all. It's the way that it has to work. The idea that you can push somebody into treatment as opposed to getting them to agree and getting their buy-in. I mean, this is true for all of us. We are much more likely to work towards a goal that is our goal as opposed to as a goal that somebody else gives to us. So the idea of meeting someone where they are is the fact that if somebody is not willing to acknowledge that their drug use has become a problem for them, sitting down and trying to force them to admit that is not going to be productive. When we confront someone, when we push somebody, that only makes them more defensive. That only causes them to, back into a corner and feel like they're being targeted or cornered. And that is generally really not helpful. So the idea that we encourage families and that we as professionals use is we're just going to talk about it. So, if I sit down with a patient and they're telling me that their drug use is not a problem, okay, that's fine. Just tell me about your drug use then. Tell me about how it's not a problem. Tell me about how it affects you, how it doesn't affect you. 9 times out of 10, they'll start to tell me how it actually is a problem for them. But that's because I'm not pushing them for that. I'm not trying to force them into saying something. It's not a gotcha with the patient. And so I would encourage the exact same thing with families. Just open that dialogue with them. It's destigmatizing to talk about it. It's important to open up those lines of communication and let them know there's no judgment and there's no agenda. It's simply that, if it's a family member, I love you, I care about you. Every part of your life is important to me, even this part of it. So I want to hear what's going on with you.
Wow, I love that. I love that attitude. It's very hard, I think, for people not to be judgmental, but I love the language that you use that allows that open conversation. It's not like you're wrong, you need to get help, but what's happening with you right now? Tell us about that. And then that allows that person to open up.
Yeah, and you also said something that hit with me as well. You said we need to get people better. And we had this conversation in our last podcast that I don't like the term. I just personally am not fond of the term clean. I don't like it because it sounds to me that you're dirty. And I keep telling people don't need to get clean. They need to get well, and let me tell you something, words have power. Words are powerful, and when you hear them over and over again, you stigmatize yourself as someone who is struggling with a loss. And make no mistake, someone who is in active addiction is suffering a loss of who they were and who they thought they wanted to be or what they thought their life would turn into. And I love that you mentioned the fact of the family. The saddest part is the family is like always on the back burner. Like they're the least most important thing when, unless you go through it, you can't imagine what it is like to watch someone that you love dying in front of you and your hands are tied and you don't know what to do and you look for help that isn't there. When he died, it wasn't there. No one was speaking like we were speaking now. No one was talking about mental health. No one was talking about trauma. It was just, people look at mental health as a weakness. They look at addiction as a choice. And until we can change that narrative, until people understand that these are real people with real problems that are struggling, my son said to me, and I will never forget this. He said, "Dad, I just wish I would die so I would stop hurting the people that I love." And he believed it. Like he believed that. He believed that he would be better. Everyone in his life would be better if he died. So how much pain do you have to be in to feel that way?
Wow.
And there's very little support for families. And they're afraid. When Tony first died, everyone said, don't tell him that he died. Like why? Why? Because this stigma, that's why. And it has to stop.
Dr. Un, so we're talking about meeting people where they are. And you've already indicated, the two of you, that there are many different strategies. It's not like a one-size-fit-all type of approach. How do you begin to decide or tailor to that individual what works best for them? What are some of the questions that you ask them?
So I think it's actually relatively irrelevant what I think. You need to start where the patient is and ask them what's going with them. How has their drug use, alcohol use affected them? And start to then craft a solution together. It's called shared decision making. We do this in rest of medicine. Like when we treat patients with diabetes, we talk about how best to treat diabetes. Well, it's no different with addiction. Addiction is a chronic disorder of the brain. You need to start with the patient and ask the question, what would you like help with? What's bothering you the most? And is this option an option that's acceptable to you? If not, how can we tweak it and modify it? That's a different approach rather than saying, you're dirty and you need to get clean. So I think it's really listening to the patient and engaging the patient, and also at the same time also engaging the family. I think you said that families are kind of set aside. Addiction is a disorder of the family in some ways because it impacts the whole family system.
Yeah.
And so how the patient does, whether it's diabetes or addiction, also involves the family. And where's the family? I mean, when you talk about your other son, okay, it's just so moving to hear the struggle that he's got. And I just wish that, he had the opportunity to have had the information about addiction and not to blame himself because, there's too much going on everywhere to be blaming people. This is a disorder of the brain. We don't blame people with diabetes.
Right.
We should not be blaming people with addiction either.
Dr. Vernig, I think that Dr. N says something that's so interesting, and that is that the disease affects the whole family, and Tony talks about it too. And what we've seen is we've seen great strides made in understanding that. And so that when you go into treatment, it seems like you really also have to look at how it impacts the whole family, because it's not just that person, but it's that person in the context of their circle, right?
Absolutely. And, just like every patient, every individual who's living with a substance use disorder is different and needs something different, every family is different and is in a different place. Sometimes what families need is they just need the support. Sometimes they need to heal as a family unit. Sometimes, if somebody's been struggling for a long time and been around, going through that cycle over and over again, the family needs to learn that it's not that individual's fault, and they need to learn to forgive the patient. They need to learn to forgive themselves as well. So just like with the patient, you need to not just dictate what needs to be done and here's the list of things you have to go through. It's the same way with the family. Assess what's going on, determine what they need, listen to what they're saying, and then try to provide support for them based on that.
Right. Well, we're going to be talking in future podcasts about all the different types of modalities that you have to offer. And there's so many because there's been so many advances in treatment. But I think, Tony, it'll be interesting for us to ask these guys how they got into this, why they're committed to this whole field of recovery. And Tony, I have to, first of all, acknowledge you for your heart and for your honesty and for your willingness to share what is clearly still a very painful thing to lose a child like that. Is and the fact that you're taking that and utilizing it for your mission to help other people, I just wanted to shout you out for that because we appreciate you so much.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's a club that no one wants to be in.
Yeah.
And that was an amazing question that you just asked me, because I'm always fascinated by why someone does what they do. And what was did you always know this is the field you wanted to do? Were you always connected in most people just, you want to help people, like, that your mission in life isn't just about making money. And again, I'm not putting anyone down. And it's the truth. Some people, their mission is they want to be successful. They're entrepreneurs, and I get it. My youngest son is a nurse, and he used to be in business, and he was like, I'm not interested in making money, Dad. I'm interested in making a difference, because that's kind of was his calling. So I'm always interested in asking, what brought you to where you are today? Did it start as a child? Was it just experiences that you had in your life? What brought you here?
Sure. So, I always knew that I wanted to do things to help people. That was always important to me. But actually, when I first was in school and was, considering careers and what direction my life would go, oddly enough, I actually studied engineering and did that for a short amount of time. But then realized that what I wanted to do was be closer to people. And don't get me wrong, engineers do things, create things, design things that help people, that serve humanity, that do wonderful things. But I wanted to be closer to that actual human connection and the helping professions. So I did then, look into and begin studying psychology. After years of study and working in the field and learning about how the field functions, all of the positives and all of the negatives too, all of the difficulties that we've kind of talked about stigma and people not getting the care that they need. Realized that is what I wanted to dedicate my life to. So I became a psychologist, and then also realized that one of the things that I enjoy is helping people with systems, helping to build systems that truly help people, that allow people to get the care that sometimes they're not able to, making those systems provide the best care possible. So I worked on the mental health side for a long time, mostly in inpatient hospitals, providing care for some of those most in need of support in our society. And then, obviously with how prevalent substance use disorders are among people living with severe mental illness, did a lot of work with substance use and eventually decided to shift a little bit more over towards the substance use side, but have been very involved, obviously, in my role, in my current position in integrating mental health services and substance use services, because that's something I think that we don't have enough of in our service delivery system and that we need more of. We kind of create this false dichotomy or the fake idea that there are substance use treatment services and then there's mental health services. And of course, that's because of the way things are licensed, and it's the way that that insurance companies pay for care. But that's a fake dichotomy. The reality is it's, one and the same. Substance use disorders are a mental illness. There's a lot of overlap between the two. And the more we can do to break down those barriers, I mean, the different groups, they struggle with the same issues, stigma, difficulties in the family. They have this cyclical relationship that makes it really hard for people to move forward.
Dr. Owen, what about you?
So I come from a family of physicians, actually a family of psychiatrists. Have a long-standing experience with mental illness and substance use treatment. One of the areas that I was really concerned about and frustrated with is in terms of the pace at which we adopt evidence-based care. And in the past 20 years, there's been this emergence of treatment of psychiatric disorder as a disorder of the brain, but it was lagging on substance use side. And there was this emerging literature from National Institute of Drug Abuse, where basically it stated that it was a disorder, chronic disorder of the brain that can be helped with therapy, but also with medication, and that the treatment needs to be continuous. And I was frustrated at the level of the adoption, so I wanted to really get into the field of SUD to try to accelerate the adoption of evidence-based care so that people were dying. Your son died. And part of that is actually our fault in some ways, the healthcare delivery, because we haven't adopted the evidence-based care at a pace that is efficient, effective, and available. And that's what got me into this area.
Wow.
What's so exciting about doing this podcast is that I learned something from it. And, I have to admit that even I had this preconception that you had to hit rock bottom before you were ready to seek treatment, because I've known so many people for whom that was true. But what you're saying is that there's a continuum and people can jump off that continuum at any point in it. And it doesn't have to be over here. It can be here or here or here. And I think that's a very important message for all of our listeners and viewers to be able to wrap their heads around. I think that's important. I learned something from this experience, and I think that's an important point to make.
It's funny when I was first approached about the podcast, we had spoken, and you can't imagine how much tremendous respect I have for you, I mean, I wouldn't want to do this with anyone. I mean, you are brilliant, brilliant, and I really want to applaud both of you, doctors. I did not want to be involved in a podcast that just gave numbers and figures, and it was the same old rhetoric that I've heard over and over and over again, the same cycle. To hear someone with your education and your status to say, you know what, we dropped the ball for 20 years. Like, we need to integrate. Like, this is what I was praying that this podcast would be. Real talk, real people, not people covering up stuff, not people not taking responsibility for anything, but people coming on and go, look, this is the reality. Yeah, things need to change. We need to get families involved more. We need to educate families more. We need to let people know that they're not useless, and they're not a waste of life, and they're not weak, and that they're struggling. And you hit on a point with diabetes, but and I agree, but it's like, I've never seen anyone walk into a hospital with a cancer patient that is suffering ever and go, well, they should have had a stronger immune system. No one says that, right? No one says that, because people believe, well, you know, cancer, you didn't ask for cancer. Well, no one asks to go through mental issues either. There are traumas in life that are so difficult to deal with. And I'm telling you firsthand, I know what it's like to be faced with a trauma that is absolutely unbearable, where death seems to be the only option that you are given to stop the pain. And to break through that, for me, it was music. Like I said, it was the music, and to write the music for people to hear it, to help them get through it. Well, everyone is different. We don't know what everyone else needs. But to be able to have those conversations, real conversations of caring, go, you know what? I don't care that you're using. That's not why we're here. I don't care. I want to know you. I want to know about you. I'm not judging you. I'm not looking at you funny. I want to know you. Talk to me. Just talk to me. That's the first line. We've just forgot how to speak to each other. We forgot how to talk in 2023. We don't know how to sit down and have a genuine conversation without judgment, or trying to force our opinion or our will on what we think, you know, is morally correct on someone else. And it's killing us as human beings. It's destroying us one person at a time. And I am so proud to be a part of this. And I don't even know what to say. I think we can do real good here and make people really understand.
Well, I'm excited for this podcast, and I'm excited to have had this conversation with all of you. Dr. Peter Vernig, if people want more information about Recovery Centers of America, how do they find out more?
If you want more information about Recovery Centers of America, you can go to our website at recoverycentersofamerica.com.
Thank you. Dr. Peter Vernig, Vice President of Mental Health Services. Dr. Hyung Eun, Chief Medical Officer, both with the Recovery Centers of America. Tony, this is awesome. I'm excited to go on to our next episode, where we're going to be talking more about the different modalities and getting down into some of the greatest state-of-the-art treatments that are available for people who are ready to address their issue with substance use.
I'm excited, and I want to thank you both again for your honesty and candor. I think what you said will touch a lot of people, and it will push them for better understanding. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
I'm Lorraine Ballard Morrow.
I'm Tony Luke Jr.
See you next time.